The first thing I noticed when I pulled into my driveway was the white Lexus SUV parked across my gravel turnaround, its rear hatch open and a stack of plastic plant trays sitting on the tailgate. The second thing I noticed was the sound of laughter coming from inside my greenhouse. Not one voice, several. Maybe 6 or 7 people, all talking at once, the way people do when they think they belong somewhere. I turned off the engine of my truck and sat there for a moment, my hands still on the wheel, the diesel ticking as it cooled. The greenhouse sat about 80 yards from the house, a 60-foot hoop structure with rolled-up sidewalls and a gravel floor, and through the plastic sheeting I could see shapes moving around inside. Shadows passing in front of my propagation benches, shadows where no shadows should be. I got out of the truck and walked toward the greenhouse, my boots crunching on the gravel. And that was when I saw the sign. It was a laminated piece of cardstock, maybe 18 inches wide, zip-tied to the greenhouse doorframe. The sign read, Spring Garden Event, Plants for Sale, Proceeds Benefit Willow Creek HOA Beautification Fund. Below that, in smaller letters, Community Access Welcome, Saturday 9 a.m. 3 p.m. I stopped walking. I read the sign again. Then I looked through the open greenhouse door and saw Patricia Callahan standing next to my seedling bench, with a clipboard in one hand and a pricing gun in the other. Patricia Callahan, HOA President, 62 years old. Retired real estate agent, the kind of woman who pronounces the word community the way other people pronounce jury duty. She was wearing a pastel cardigan and white capri pants, and she was pointing at trays of my heirloom tomato starts, while a cluster of garden club volunteers nodded and wrote things down on little notepads. One of them, a woman I recognized as the treasurer's wife, was sticking bright orange price tags onto the edges of my 4-inch nursery pots. My pots, my plants, my greenhouse. I did not raise my voice. I did not storm through the door. I pulled out my phone and took 3 photographs of the sign, the open door, and the people inside. Then I took a photograph of the white Lexus with its license plate visible. Then I walked back to my truck, opened the glove box, and pulled out the manila folder I keep there. The folder contained a copy of my nursery license, my phytosanitary inspection certificate, my sales tax permit, and a printed inventory list from the restaurant order I had delivered 3 days earlier. I tucked the folder under my arm and walked back toward the greenhouse. Patricia saw me first. Her expression flickered. Surprise, then recovery, then something that looked almost like annoyance. And she set the pricing gun down on my potting bench like she was doing me a favor by using it. "Oh good, you're back," she said. "We were just getting organized. The garden club voted to use this space for the spring sale since it's been sitting empty. And I have to say, the seedlings are in wonderful shape. Did you start these yourself?" I stopped in the doorway. The garden club volunteers, 5 of them, all women I recognized from HOA meetings, turned to look at me. One of them, a younger woman with a ponytail and an HOA logo polo shirt, was holding her phone up like she'd been filming. Patricia's niece, I remembered. Megan. She ran the HOA's Instagram account. "This is a private greenhouse," I said. "It operates under a state nursery license. You are trespassing." Patricia smiled the way people smile when they think they're about to explain something to someone who doesn't understand how the world works. "The board reviewed the plat map last month," she said. "This structure is located within the HOA's common area setback. The previous owner never filed for an exclusion, and the beautification committee has designated this as unused community space. We're well within our rights." She said unused community space, the way someone might say abandoned shopping cart, as if my greenhouse, my 3-year-old, climate-controlled, commercially licensed greenhouse, was just sitting here, waiting for someone with a clipboard to find a purpose for it. I did not argue with her. I did not explain the plat map, or the recorded survey, or the fact that my property line extended 40 feet beyond the greenhouse in every direction. I did not mention that the previous owner was my father, who had deeded me this parcel 5 years before he died, or that the HOA's own covenants explicitly excluded agricultural structures from common area designation. Instead, I looked at the pricing gun. Then I looked at the orange price tags on my tomato starts. Then I looked at the clipboard in Patricia's hand, which had a printed spreadsheet clipped to it. The spreadsheet had columns for plant variety, pot size, and price. At the bottom of the page, I could see a total, $2,340. "Where did you get the inventory list?" I asked. Patricia blinked. "I'm sorry? The spreadsheet. Where did you get the plant names and quantities?" She glanced at the treasurer's wife, who looked down at her notepad. Megan walked through yesterday and cataloged everything, Patricia said. The door was unlocked. The door had not been unlocked. I had locked it myself before leaving for the supply run, and I had the key in my pocket right now. Someone had picked the padlock, or cut it, or found another way in. But I didn't say that yet. I was still looking at the spreadsheet. Because some of the plants on that list, the Brandywine tomatoes, the Cherokee purples, the basil flats, were plants I had already sold. I had delivered them to a restaurant in town 3 days ago. I had an invoice. I had a signed receipt. I had a paper trail. And yet here they were, on Patricia's spreadsheet, with orange price tags stuck to their pots. These plants are not for sale, I said. They are part of a commercial inventory. Some of them have already been sold and delivered. You are pricing stolen property. The garden club volunteers stopped writing. The treasurer's wife set her notepad down. Megan lowered her phone. Patricia's smile tightened at the corners, but she did not back down. I think you're being dramatic, she said. These are seedlings. They're sitting in a greenhouse on HOA-adjacent land. The board has already approved the event. If you have a concern, you can bring it to the next meeting. She picked up the pricing gun again. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a lot of work to do before Saturday. I did not move from the doorway. I looked at the pricing gun. I looked at the spreadsheet. I looked at the orange price tags. Then I looked at Patricia Callahan's face, her confident, polished, I've been doing this for 30 years face. And I said the only thing that mattered in that moment. Put that in writing. She frowned. Excuse me? The board's authorization. The plat map review. The designation of this greenhouse as community space. I want it in writing. Email it to me. Today. Patricia laughed, a short little sound that was meant to dismiss me. I don't have time for paperwork theatrics. The board's decision is the board's decision. Then you won't mind confirming it, I said. In writing. With the parcel number. And the date of the board vote. I stepped out of the doorway. I'll wait for the email. I walked back to my truck, got in, and drove the 80 yards to my house. I did not look back at the greenhouse. I did not need to. I already had everything I needed. The photographs, the sign, the spreadsheet, the orange price tags. And in about 2 hours, I would have Patricia Callahan's email. Because people like Patricia cannot resist putting their authority on paper. They think writing things down makes them official. They don't realize it makes them evidence. Before I explain what happened next, tell me where you're watching from. I'm always curious who's out there dealing with their own version of Patricia Callahan. My name is Daniel Morrow. I'm 41 years old, and I own a small licensed nursery in Willow Creek, North Carolina. I grow heirloom vegetable starts, culinary herbs, and specialty greens for about a dozen restaurants in the Tri-County area. It's not a big operation, just the greenhouse, a shade house, and about 2 acres of field rows. But it's mine, and it's licensed, and it's inspected, and it's the only thing I've built entirely on my own since my father died. The property belonged to my father. He bought it in 1987, back when Willow Creek was still mostly farmland and the HOA didn't exist. The subdivision went in around him in the late 90s. 240 houses, a clubhouse, a pool, and a set of covenants that my father refused to sign. He was already here. The developer tried to pressure him, then tried to buy him out, then tried to sue him. None of it worked. My father was a surveyor by trade, and he knew exactly where his property lines were. When the HOA finally incorporated in 2001, they had to draw their boundary around his parcel. He was never a member. He never paid dues. He never voted, and when he died in 2018, he left me the land free and clear, with a recorded deed, a current survey, and a folder full of correspondence from the HOA's original attorney, confirming that parcel 47-8-12 was not, and never had been, part of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. I knew all of this. Patricia Callahan knew some of it. What she didn't know, what she had never bothered to learn, was that my greenhouse wasn't just a hobby shed. It was a commercially licensed nursery, registered with the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. My license number was NCL-047812. My inspection certificate was current. My phytosanitary protocols were documented, and one of the conditions of my license was that unauthorized public access to the growing areas was strictly prohibited. Not discouraged, not frowned upon, prohibited. It was a biosecurity rule, designed to prevent the spread of soil-borne pathogens, pests, and plant diseases. If a state inspector found evidence of uncontrolled public traffic in a licensed nursery, they could suspend the license on the spot. Patricia Callahan had just opened my greenhouse to the public. She had brought in volunteers. She had let them handle plants. She had stuck price tags on inventory. And she had done it all without my knowledge, my consent, or even a basic understanding of what she was risking. The email arrived at 4:17 p.m. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my father's old survey folder open in front of me. My laptop chimed and I opened the message. From Patricia Callahan, HOA President. Subject, Community Garden Event. Greenhouse Access Authorization. The body of the email was exactly what I expected. Patricia wrote that the HOA board had reviewed the plat map at their March meeting and determined that the greenhouse structure fell within a common area setback originally designated by the developer. She wrote that the beautification committee had voted unanimously to use the space for the spring plant sale. She wrote that the board considered the greenhouse abandoned or underutilized community space, and that the garden club had been granted full access for event preparation. She included the date of the board vote. She included the parcel number, my parcel number, 47-12, which she claimed was subject to HOA common area easement per original plat. She included the names of the board members who had voted, and at the bottom of the email she wrote, "If you have any concerns, please direct them to the HOA attorney. The event will proceed as scheduled." I read the email twice. Then I printed it. Then I added it to the folder. The folder was getting thick now. Photographs of the sign. Photographs of the volunteers. Photographs of the pricing gun and the orange tags. A copy of my nursery license. A copy of my inspection certificate. A copy of the restaurant invoice for the plants that were now sitting in my greenhouse with HOA price tags on them. And now, Patricia's email. I called my assistant, Elena, and asked her to meet me at the greenhouse the next morning. Elena Vasquez is 26 years old, a horticulture graduate from NC State, and the most meticulous record keeper I have ever met. She's been working with me for 2 years, and she knows every plant in the greenhouse by variety, tray number, and sale status. When I told her what had happened, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "The Cherokee purples were already delivered." "I know. And the basil flats. Those went to Meridian on Tuesday." "I know. So they're selling plants that don't belong to them. Plants that don't even belong to us anymore." "That's correct." Elena was quiet again. Then she said, "What do you want me to do?" "Meet me at the greenhouse at 7. Bring the inventory binder and the delivery receipts." The next morning, Elena and I walked through the greenhouse together. The garden club volunteers had been busy. They had rearranged my propagation benches, moved trays of seedlings into color-coordinated displays, and set up a folding table near the door with a cash box and a stack of HOA-branded shopping bags. The orange price tags were everywhere. On the tomato starts, on the pepper plants, on the herb flats, on the lettuce plugs, on the cucumber trellises. Elena walked down the center aisle with her inventory binder open, checking tray numbers against her records. Every few steps, she stopped and pointed at a plant. "Sold," Fee said. "Delivered Tuesday." She pointed at another. "Sold. Delivered Monday." Another. "Sold. Delivered last Friday." By the time we reached the back of the greenhouse, Elena had identified 47 plants that were no longer part of my inventory. 47 plants that I had already sold, delivered, and been paid for. 47 plants that Patricia Callahan had priced and tagged for her HOA fundraiser. The total value of those plants, based on my wholesale pricing, was just over $800. But the HOA's retail prices, the prices on the orange tags, totaled nearly $1,400. Patricia wasn't just selling my plants, she was marking them up. I took photographs of everything. Elena documented the tray numbers, the original sale dates, and the HOA price tags. We worked in silence for about an hour, and then Elena looked up from her binder and said, "Daniel, there's something else." She was standing near the back corner of the greenhouse, where I kept my mother's stock. The parent plants I used for cuttings and seed production. These were not for sale. They were the foundation of my entire nursery operation, and someone had moved them. The pots had been shifted, the labels had been rearranged, and on the edge of one of the pots there was a bright orange price tag. "They tagged the mother stock," Elena said. Her voice was flat, but I could hear the anger underneath it. "They tagged plants that aren't even inventory." I looked at the price tag. $24.99. For a plant that had taken me 3 years to develop. A plant that was the genetic source for an entire line of restaurant-grade basil. A plant that was, in a very real sense, irreplaceable. I took a photograph of the tag, then I carefully removed it. Then I called the county extension office and asked to speak with the plant inspector. His name was Robert Chen. He was a quiet, methodical man in his 50s who had been inspecting nurseries in the Piedmont region for over 20 years. I had met him twice before, during my initial licensing inspection and my annual renewal visit. He knew my operation, he knew my protocols, and when I told him what had happened, he was silent for a long moment. Unauthorized public access, he said. Yes. How many people? At least 6 that I saw, possibly more. They've been in and out for at least 2 days. Did they handle the plants? Yes. They moved them, repotted some of them, tagged them. Did they bring in outside soil or tools? I don't know. There's a folding table and a cash box. I haven't checked for other equipment. Robert was quiet again. Then he said, I need to come out there, today. Robert arrived at 2 p.m. He was driving a white county truck with the Agriculture Department logo on the door, and he was carrying a clipboard and a digital camera. I met him at the greenhouse door and walked him through the entire space. He took photographs of the rearranged benches. He took photographs of the orange price tags. He took photographs of the folding table, the cash box, the HOA shopping bags. He asked to see my inventory records, and Elena brought him the binder. He compared the delivery receipts to the tagged plants. He counted the mother stock. He checked the soil surfaces for signs of contamination. When he was finished, he stood in the center of the greenhouse and wrote something on his clipboard. Then he looked at me and said, This is a reportable violation. I know. If I file this, the state will open an investigation. Your license could be suspended pending review. I know. You're not required to report yourself. You could clean this up internally, and I wouldn't have to file anything. I looked at the orange price tags. I looked at the HOA shopping bags. I looked at the laminated sign still zip-tied to my door frame. File the report, I said. I want it on record. Robert nodded. He finished his notes, took one more photograph of the sign, and handed me a copy of his preliminary findings. Then he got back in his county truck and drove away. That evening, I sent Patricia Callahan an email. I attached a copy of my nursery license. I attached a copy of the state biosecurity regulations. I attached a copy of Robert Chen's preliminary findings, and I wrote, This greenhouse is a licensed commercial nursery. Unauthorized public access violates state biosecurity regulations and jeopardizes my operating license. The plants you have tagged include inventory that was already sold and delivered to commercial buyers. The plants you have moved include mother stock that is not for sale at any price. You have 24 hours to remove all HOA property from my greenhouse, cancel the event, and provide written confirmation that no further unauthorized access will occur. If you do not comply, I will file a formal complaint with the Department of Agriculture and pursue all available legal remedies. I hit send. Then I waited. The response came the next morning. Not from Patricia, but from the HOA's attorney. His name was Gerald Whitfield, and his letter was 3 pages long. It accused me of harassing HOA volunteers, interfering with a community event, and making false claims about licensing requirements. It demanded that I cease and desist from contacting board members directly, and warned that the HOA would pursue legal action for interference with association activities. It did not mention the nursery license. It did not mention the biosecurity regulations. It did not mention the sold inventory or the mother stock or the county inspector's report. It was a form letter, the kind of thing Gerald Whitfield probably kept in a folder on his desktop and customized with the name of whoever was currently annoying the board. I read it twice, then I added it to the folder. Then I called my own attorney. Her name was Sarah Okonkwo, and she specialized in agricultural law. She had helped me set up the nursery license 3 years earlier, and she understood the regulatory framework better than anyone I knew. When I told her what had happened, she asked me to send her everything. The photographs, the emails, the inspection report, the HOA attorney's letter, the inventory records, the delivery receipts. I sent it all. She called me back an hour later. Daniel, she said, this is not a property dispute. This is a regulatory violation with potential criminal liability. The HOA president entered a licensed agricultural facility without authorization, interfered with commercial inventory, and exposed the operation to a biosecurity violation. The fact that she tagged and priced plants that had already been sold to other buyers could constitute fraud, and the fact that she did it in writing, with board authorization, makes the entire HOA potentially liable. What do you recommend? I recommend we send a preservation letter to the HOA, demanding that they retain all records related to the garden club event, the board vote, and the greenhouse access. I recommend we notify the Department of Agriculture of the violation, which you've already done through the inspector. And I recommend we notify the restaurants whose plants were tagged, because they may have their own claims. Do it, I said. All of it. Sarah sent the preservation letter that afternoon. She copied Gerald Whitfield, the entire HOA board, and the HOA's insurance carrier. She also copied the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, the county extension office, and the 3 restaurants whose plants had been tagged. The response was immediate and chaotic. Gerald Whitfield called Sarah within an hour, demanding to know why she had copied the insurance carrier. The insurance carrier called Gerald Whitfield within 2 hours, demanding to know why they hadn't been notified earlier. The board treasurer, a man named Howard Simmons, who had always seemed vaguely uncomfortable with Patricia's leadership, sent an email to the entire board asking for an emergency meeting. And Patricia Callahan sent me a text message. "You're making a mistake," it said. "This could have been handled neighborly." I did not respond. I was done being neighborly. The next day was Friday. The spring garden event was scheduled for Saturday at 9 a.m. Patricia had not canceled it. The HOA had not removed their property from my greenhouse. The laminated sign was still zip-tied to my doorframe. So I made one more phone call. I called the restaurant buyer whose plants had been tagged. Her name was Angela Cross, and she was the head chef at Meridian, a farm-to-table restaurant in downtown Willow Creek. She had been buying my heirloom tomatoes and basil for 2 years, and she was one of the reasons my nursery had survived the pandemic. When I told her what had happened, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "They tagged my plants?" "Yes." "The ones I already paid for?" "Yes." "And they were going to sell them at a garden club fundraiser?" "Yes." Angela was quiet again. Then she said, "What time does the event start?" 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'll be there. Saturday morning dawned clear and cool, the kind of spring day that makes people want to plant things. I was standing on my front porch with a cup of coffee when the first cars started arriving. They came down the gravel road that led to my property, past the private drive sign that my father had installed 30 years earlier, and parked in the grass along the edge of my field. HOA residents, garden club members, people carrying reusable shopping bags and cash envelopes. Patricia Callahan was already at the greenhouse. She had arrived at 7:30 a.m. in her white Lexus, and she had been setting up for the event ever since. She had added more signs, and directional arrows, price lists, a banner that read, "Willow Creek Spring Garden Sale." And she had stationed Megan near the door with her phone, ready to document the event for Instagram. I watched from my porch as the crowd grew. 20 people, 30, 40. They milled around outside the greenhouse, waiting for Patricia to open the doors. Some of them were holding the HOA's event flyer, which Patricia had emailed to the entire neighborhood 2 days earlier. The flyer featured a photograph of my greenhouse, taken without my permission, obviously, and a list of featured plants that included the very varieties Angela Cross had already purchased. At 8:55 a.m., I walked down to the greenhouse. I was carrying my folder. Elena was with me, carrying her inventory binder. And behind us, just pulling into the driveway, were 3 more vehicles. Angela Cross in her restaurant van, Robert Chen in his county truck, and Sarah Okonkwo in her silver sedan. Patricia saw us coming. Her expression shifted from confident to wary to something that looked almost like fear. She stepped in front of the greenhouse door, her clipboard in one hand and her pricing gun in the other, and she said, "This is a private HOA event. You're not welcome here." I stopped about 10 feet from her. The crowd of residents had gone quiet. They were watching. "This is my greenhouse," I said. "It operates under a state nursery license. You are trespassing and you are in violation of multiple state regulations." "I've already spoken to our attorney," Patricia said. "This is community space. The board authorized access to a property it does not own," Sarah said, stepping forward. She was holding a folder of her own, and she handed Patricia a document. "This is a copy of the recorded deed for parcel 47-8-12. It shows clear title in the name of Daniel Morrow. It is not part of the HOA. It never has been. Your own covenants confirm this." Patricia did not take the document. That deed doesn't override the plat map, she said. The developer designated this area as common setback. The board reviewed it. The plat map you reviewed is a marketing brochure from 1998, Sarah said. It is not a recorded survey. The recorded survey, which is on file with the County Register of Deeds, shows Mr. Morrow's property extending 40 feet beyond the greenhouse in every direction. There is no easement, there is no common area. There is no setback that gives the HOA any right to this land. Patricia's face had gone pale. The crowd was murmuring now. Some of the residents were looking at the flyers in their hands, then at the greenhouse, then at me. That's not, Patricia started. Additionally, Sarah continued, this greenhouse is a licensed commercial nursery. Unauthorized public access violates state biosecurity regulations. Mr. Chen, the county plant inspector, has already documented the violation and filed a preliminary report. The Department of Agriculture has been notified. Robert Chen stepped forward. He was holding his clipboard, and he looked deeply uncomfortable. I inspected the facility on Thursday, he said. I found evidence of unauthorized access, inventory tampering, and potential biosecurity risks. The nursery license is currently under review. The crowd's murmuring got louder. Someone near the back said, "What does that mean?" It means, Sarah said, that the HOA's actions have jeopardized a licensed agricultural business. It means that the plants you are about to buy may be subject to regulatory seizure. And it means that anyone who enters this greenhouse without authorization is potentially contributing to a biosecurity violation. Patricia looked at the crowd. She looked at Sarah. She looked at Robert Chen. Then she looked at me. This is ridiculous, she said. These are seedlings. They're not a biosecurity risk. You're blowing this out of proportion to avoid cooperating with the community. Angela Cross stepped forward. She was holding a printed invoice. Are you Patricia Callahan? She asked. Patricia blinked. Yes. Who are you? I'm the chef at Meridian. I purchased 47 plants from this nursery last week. I have the invoices and the delivery receipts, and I understand those plants are currently sitting in this greenhouse with your price tags on them. Patricia's mouth opened, then closed. Those plants are my property, Angela said. I paid for them. They were delivered to my restaurant, and somehow they ended up back here, tagged for your fundraiser. I'd like an explanation. The crowd was completely silent now. 40 people, standing in the morning sun, watching Patricia Callahan try to find words. I didn't know, Patricia said finally. The plants were just sitting here. No one told me they were already sold. You didn't ask, I said. You didn't check. You didn't call. You just assumed. I opened my folder and pulled out the printed email. You assumed this greenhouse was abandoned. You assumed the board had authority. You assumed the plat map was accurate. You assumed I wouldn't push back. I held up the email. And you put it all in writing. Patricia stared at the email. Her face had gone from pale to red. That email was a courtesy, she said. It means you authorized trespassing on a licensed agricultural facility, Sarah said. It means you interfered with commercial inventory. It means you exposed the HOA to significant liability. And it means that every board member who voted for this is potentially liable as well. From somewhere in the crowd, a voice said, I voted against it. It was Howard Simmons, the board treasurer. He was standing near the back of the crowd, holding a copy of the event flyer, and he looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on a trap door. I voted against the greenhouse access, he said, louder this time. I told Patricia we didn't have the authority. I told her to check the deed. She said she had. He looked at Patricia. You told the board you had checked the deed. Patricia's composure cracked. I did check it, she said. I checked the plat map, the developer's plat map. It showed the setback. The developer's plat map is not a deed, Howard said. It's a marketing document. I told you that. You didn't tell me it wasn't recorded. I absolutely did. At the March meeting. It's in the minutes. The minutes. Howard had just mentioned the minutes. I looked at Sarah, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. The board minutes were a record of everything that had been discussed, including any warnings about the deed. If Howard had raised concerns and Patricia had overruled him, that was evidence of willful disregard. It was also evidence that Patricia had misled the board. I'd like a copy of those minutes, Sarah said. Howard looked at Patricia, then at Sarah, then at me. I'll send them to you today, he said. Patricia turned on him. Howard, you cannot. I can, Howard said. I'm the treasurer. I have access to all board records. And I'm not going to be personally liable because you didn't do your due diligence. The crowd was no longer a unified group of garden club supporters. They were fragmenting. Some people were putting their cash envelopes back in their pockets. Some were looking at the flyers with new eyes. A few were edging toward their cars. Megan, Patricia's niece, was still holding her phone, but she wasn't filming anymore. She was staring at her aunt with an expression I couldn't quite read. "The event is canceled," I said. I said it loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The greenhouse is closed. The plants are not for sale. Anyone who remains on this property without authorization is trespassing." Patricia opened her mouth to argue, but before she could speak, Robert Chen stepped forward again. "I need to secure the facility," he said. "As part of the biosecurity investigation, I'm placing a temporary hold on all plant movement in and out of this greenhouse. No plants can be sold, transferred, or removed until the investigation is complete." He looked at Patricia. "That includes any plants that have already been tagged or priced." Patricia's pricing gun clattered to the gravel. She didn't pick it up. The crowd dispersed slowly. Some people apologized to me as they left. Some people glared at Patricia. A few people asked if the nursery would be open later in the season, once the investigation was resolved. I told them I hoped so. By 10 a.m., the greenhouse was empty except for me, Elena, Robert Chen, and the remnants of Patricia's event setup. The folding table, the cash box, the HOA shopping bags, the laminated signs, the orange price tags. Patricia had left in her white Lexus without saying another word. Megan had gone with her, but not before stopping to say something to me. "I didn't know," she said, "about the license, about the sold plants. She told me it was abandoned." "It wasn't abandoned," I said. "It was locked." Megan looked at the greenhouse door. The padlock was still hanging from the hasp, undamaged. "Then how did she get in?" she asked. I looked at the padlock. Then I looked at Megan. "That's a very good question." The answer came 3 days later, in the form of a confession from the HOA's maintenance contractor. His name was Dale Evers, and he had been doing odd jobs for the HOA for about 6 months. Patricia had given him a key to the greenhouse. She had told him it was HOA property, that the lock needed to be changed, and that the garden club needed access for the event. Dale had believed her. He had cut my padlock, installed a new one, and given Patricia the key. He had no idea the greenhouse was privately owned. He had no idea it was a licensed nursery. He had no idea he had just admitted to breaking and entering. When Sarah called him to discuss his role in the incident, he was cooperative, apologetic, and terrified. He provided a written statement detailing exactly what Patricia had told him, when she had told him, and how much she had paid him for the work. The statement became Exhibit G in the folder. The aftermath unfolded over the next several weeks. The Department of Agriculture opened a formal investigation into the biosecurity violation. Robert Chen conducted a follow-up inspection and determined that the contamination risk was minimal. The volunteers had not brought in outside soil, and the mother stock had not been damaged, but the violation itself was still on record. My nursery license was placed on probation for 6 months, which meant increased inspections and additional paperwork. It was a headache, but it was survivable. The HOA's insurance carrier denied coverage for the incident. The policy excluded intentional acts by board members outside the scope of their authority, and Patricia's decision to enter a private greenhouse without verifying ownership qualified. The HOA was now personally exposed to liability for the trespassing, the inventory interference, and the biosecurity violation. Gerald Whitfield, the HOA's attorney, sent Sarah a settlement offer within 2 weeks. It included reimbursement for the damaged lock, compensation for the disrupted inventory, and a written acknowledgement that Parcel 47-8-12 was not part of the HOA. I accepted the reimbursement and the acknowledgement. I declined the compensation because accepting it would have required me to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and I had no intention of staying quiet. The board held an emergency meeting in late April. Howard Simmons, the treasurer, had circulated the March meeting minutes to the entire board, along with a copy of my deed and a summary of the regulatory violations. The minutes clearly showed that Howard had raised concerns about the greenhouse access, that Patricia had dismissed those concerns, and that the board had voted based on incomplete information. Patricia Callahan resigned as HOA president before the meeting ended. She did not attend in person. She sent an email the garden club dissolved 2 weeks later. Most of the volunteers had been horrified to learn they had been trespassing, and several of them sent me handwritten apology notes. The treasurer's wife returned the pricing gun. Megan deleted the HOA's Instagram account. Angela Cross received a formal apology from the HOA board and a reimbursement for the plants that had been tagged. She still buys from me. In fact, she increased her order for the summer season, and she put a note on the invoice that said, "For the Cherokee Purples." Robert Chen closed the biosecurity investigation in May. He issued a formal warning to the HOA, not to me, and noted in his final report that the violation had been caused by unauthorized access by individuals with no knowledge of nursery regulations. My license was removed from probation in September. Elena still works with me. She updated the inventory binder with a new section, Incident Documentation. It contains copies of every photograph, every email, every inspection report, and every board minute related to the greenhouse trespass. She calls it the Patricia file. I call it insurance. The greenhouse is quiet now. The propagation benches are back in their original positions. The mother stock is healthy and unbothered. The laminated signs are gone, replaced by a single metal sign that reads, "Private property, licensed nursery, no trespassing." The orange price tags are in a plastic bag in my filing cabinet, along with the pricing gun and the HOA shopping bags. I keep them as a reminder, not of what Patricia did, but of what she didn't do. She didn't check the deed. She didn't read the license. She didn't ask permission. She didn't verify the plat map. She didn't listen to her own treasurer. She assumed. She assumed the greenhouse was abandoned. She assumed the board had authority. She assumed I would back down. She assumed silence was weakness. It wasn't. It was preparation. And now, every time I walk into my greenhouse and see the seedlings growing in their neat rows, I think about the folder in my filing cabinet. The folder with the photographs, the emails, the inspection reports, and the board minutes. The folder that Patricia Callahan filled with her own words, her own assumptions, her own arrogance. The folder that ended her. The morning light comes through the greenhouse plastic, soft and diffused, and the basil smells like summer. I check the soil moisture, adjust the drip lines, and make a note in the propagation log. Outside, the gravel road is empty. The white Lexus is gone. The signs are gone. The crowd is gone. It's just me, the plants, and the quiet. The way it should be. The way it always should have been.